Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Dissecting Zeta Gundam, the series where we do a literary style analysis of each episode of a Mobile Suit Gundam series. Today we're looking at episode 5 of Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam entitled Father and Son. Now this episode has a lot of major story moments and some plot development, but in particular I want to focus on the exchange between Kamille and Quattro near the end of the episode because it has some seriously revealing character moments that I want to try and highlight. My name is Steven, aka Midnight Hatter, and I will be your Sherpa up this mountain of critical analysis. As always, major spoilers ahead, so here's your warning. Let's hop into it. The episode opens with Bask Ulm and Jamai Khan debriefing the Titans after losing the Gundam Mark IIs as well as their hostages Franklin and Camille Badon. They comment on the inspirational rallying effect that the red mobile suit has on the AEUG armed forces. Now they're obviously talking about the red Rick DS that's being piloted by Char Aznable. The red Rick DS that's being piloted by Quattro Bagina. But seriously, if you guys have not picked up on the fact that Quattro is secretly Char Aznable, I don't know what to tell you. But suffice to say, we're going to have to deal with a lot of these sort of moments going forward where almost every character in the series has this suspense of disbelief that Char is dead and that Quattro is this new and totally original character that none of us have ever seen before. But we'll leave that for later. Now, I only bring up this minor exchange because it's important to notice that they are commenting on the red Rick DS because that is going to be important in the episode later on. Now, back aboard the Argama, Lieutenant Quattro is hatching a plan to lead a counterattack against the Titans while they're currently off balance. They've lost all of their Gundam Mark IIs, as well as one of their ace pilots in A Machine. Now, I do want to draw your attention to the sort of depth of field effect going on here, where in the foreground we have Quattro's drink, and then in the background we have Commodore Blex, and we have that out of focus appearance. It's just one of those many animation tricks that they used to give Zeta Gundam a cinematic feel. Now, in the hangar bay of the Argama, Lieutenant Franklin Badon is making a nuisance of himself. He's constantly harassing the other engineers and Astanage as they're trying to disassemble the Gundam Mark IIs so that they can repaint them in AEUG colors. Now, I often talk about how in Tomino-directed Gundams, the characters are the ones responsible for advancing the story, instead of the plot just sort of happening to the characters as time goes on. In this particular case, we have Franklin Badon making the choice to steal a laser torch, and he takes Astanage hostage in order to steal one of the Rick DS and return to the Titans. Now, I want you to take note of which Rick DS Franklin Badon chooses to steal here. He goes for the red one, Char's Rick DS, and similar to Jamai Khan and Bask, he's probably surmising that because the red Rick DS seems to have this inspirational effect on the AEUG soldiers, that it's probably like a higher spec or, higher performance mobile suit designed for ace pilots, when in reality, we, the audience, know that the effect is not coming from the mobile suit itself, the effect is coming from its pilot, Char Aznable. Now, I want to draw your attention to this brief exchange between Char and Kamille because it highlights maybe some of the changes that we've seen in Char between the 1 Year War and today, given everything that he's been through. Kamille is about to take one of the Gundam Mark IIs and pursue Lieutenant Franklin and hopefully bring him back alive, at which point Char stops him and Kamille says, "I apologize for the actions of my father." And Char responds to him by saying, "There's nothing for you to apologize about." Now, this is a far cry from the Char Aznable that we saw during the 1 Year War, who took out his revenge for his father's death on Garmazabi. Garmazabi had nothing to do with the death of Zeon Daikun, and yet Char Aznable chose to punish Garmazabi. So we see this sort of character change going on here, where in the past, Char has held people responsible for the sins of their fathers, holding Garmazabi responsible for the sins of Degwin. Or maybe he was just punishing Degwin by taking away his favorite son. In this instance, we have Franklin Badon, who has stolen the Rick DS from the AEUG, and Kamille is actually taking responsibility. He's saying, "I'm sorry, it's my fault," and Quattro is saying, "No, there's nothing for you to apologize about." So it's one of those moments where you kind of see the maturity in Char Aznable from 0079 to 0087. Now, before he goes, Quattro asks Kamille a very pressing question. He asks, "Can you fire at your own father?" He knows that Franklin Badon is not likely to go quietly, and he suspects that Kamille would hesitate if presented with the unfortunate choice of having to open fire on his own father. And so it's one of those things where he's not necessarily questioning Camille's commitment, but he is concerned about Camille's safety because hesitation can get a soldier killed. Now, there's a quick exchange here between Commodore Blex and Captain Henkin where they're discussing the Red Comet, and at the Battle of Abaoku, Captain Henkin was stationed on a Salamis, in the rear guard, and so he never actually saw the Zeong in person, but he's heard stories about what Char Aznable was capable of. It's one of those moments that kind of contradicts an earlier episode that we saw where Captain Henkin kind of teased Quattro about perhaps being a new type and can he sense the presence of other new types, yet here he seems to be oblivious to the fact that Quattro is Char. So there are a little bit of mixed messages, and there's some nice character building going on where we get to see where Captain Henkin came from, that he is a veteran of the Earth Federation Space Forces, and maybe they know that Quattro is a new type, but they don't necessarily know that he is Char Aznable. And so there's a little bit of teasing going on about that. And there's a brief scene where Kamille escapes from Requa's custody so that he can steal one of the Gundam Mark IIs and go aid in the capture of Lieutenant Franklin. And he says this rather odd line to Requa, where he suggests people like you who have lived a fortunate life could never understand. And it's one of those moments that I think lends to Camille's immaturity and his sense of persecution that he tends to feel throughout the series. He tends to have this sort of woe is me attitude that I think turns off a lot of people to him as a character. But I think that it's one of those realistic portrayals of what it's like to be a teenager. And Kamille being a 17-year-old, Tomino is one of those types of people that writes very realistic characters. And for that reason, a lot of people don't necessarily resonate with them because they don't represent a sort of idealized form of a character that they want to live up to. It's kind of like we have these ideals that we want to see in our characters. We want to be Superman because he is an ideal, but we don't necessarily want to be, Frank Castle or something like that. We don't want to be Kamille Badon because he shows us a little too much of who we really are. And so that's one of the things about Tomino's writing is that he tends to write characters as they are and not how we want them to be. And we'll see that a lot going forward with both Kamille and Requa. And in particular, we're going to touch on that towards the end of the episode as well. Now, it's not long before a battle breaks out as Quattro, Apolly, and Roberto catch up to Franklin Badon in the Rick Diaz. And in addition, we have Lieutenant Jared launching from the Alexandria with a pair of Hyzacs to intercept the incoming mobile suits. And it's one of those situations where it's ripe for friendly fire because we've got the Gundam Mark II, which is a Titan's mobile suit that's in AEUG colors and fighting for the AEUG, but we also have one Rick Diaz that's fighting on behalf of the Titans. And so there's a lot of confusion going on in this particular scene. As the chase ensues, Franklin is seemingly distracted by some flashbacks of his mistress Margarita, who we've only ever heard described by name up to this point. She's been a major point of contention between he and Kamille and his late wife Hilda, and the fact that she comes up now kind of suggests that maybe there's something more going on. We'll never get any more solid details about this character, so we can only really speculate about the importance of things like fidelity and Franklin's broken relationships with women, and then how that trait is then passed down to Kamille, who we are going to see struggle with issues like infatuation and temptation and broken relationships with women later on in the series. Kamille launches in a Gundam Mark II and engages his father, but right at the moment when he would have fired, he hesitates, giving Franklin an opportunity to counterattack, which is exactly what Quattro was afraid of. Franklin says that he's failed him as a father, which I think we'll agree is the understatement of the year, and one of the last things that Kamille says to him is that Franklin never understood him. Now, we could chalk this up to typical sort of teenage angst, but it could be hinting at something deeper within Kamille, such as his latent new type abilities, which his father failed to connect with. Quattro hits the Rick Diaz squarely in the chest with the beam rifle. Franklin tries to escape the damaged mobile suit before it suddenly explodes, sending him careening into deep space. And now Kamille has watched both of his parents die right before his eyes. So now that the Titans have given the order to retreat and Kamille and the others have returned to the Argama, this is the scene that I really want to focus on. First, note the surreal green tones of the lighting in this room, which I think add to the sort of uneasiness and sick feeling that one might associate with having almost killed one of their parents. Now, Quattro tries to ease Camille's guilt about this by suggesting that Lieutenant Franklin was going to be killed one way or the other. Lieutenant Emma enters the room, and it's hard to say whether she makes the situation better or worse. Quattro suggests that now she's with the AEUG, her parents might be used as human shields the way that Camille's were. And then we see Kamille going back to that old habit of biting his nails when he's nervous. Emma says how her parents would support her decision to join the AEUG, and Kamille is deeply hurt by this, especially now when his father died trying to rejoin the Titans instead of just standing with his son. Kamille resents that Emma has what appears to be a loving family. Emma and Rekoa try to calm Kamille down and say that his parents loved him, but he won't hear it. He says that they could never act like adults and be real parents, and that he just wanted them to be normal. Now, in a sense, we can say that the brokenness in Camille's family is normal in our world, unfortunately, but members of the AEUG are trying to suppress his pain rather than help him overcome it, which, again, is an all-too-normal human response when seeing that kind of raw brokenness. Furthermore, look at his choice of words here, child and kid. Gone is that tough exterior and that insistence on his manhood. Just like Emma had pointed out earlier, Kamille retreats to his status as a child whenever he feels powerless in a situation. Next, we're treated to that infamous line, "Have you ever heard of Char Aznable?" Quattro tries to relate his own pain to Camille's, and in a sense, he's right. They did suffer from a very similar trauma at a very young age. Kamille says how foolish Char was to go and try and change everything on his own, and it's at this point that Rekoa is shooting Quattro one of those sideways glances that says, "This is a bad idea, you shouldn't have brought this topic up." Quattro presses on and goes on to say that Char believed that expressing his own emotions was the most important thing to overcome in any situation. It's a message that really reinforces the idea of stoicism, and we can agree that Char himself is a very stoic figure. But before Quattro can elaborate, Kamille storms out of the room. Now, this is another tiny detail that I want to bring up because it's one of those little character moments that you may miss if you're not watching carefully. You see, Kamille trips over Emma's leg when he's leaving the room, and it's not meant to be funny or a gag because there's no break for laughter or highlighting the moment. You see, I suspect that this is one of those very realistic Tomino moments that Gundam is famous for. Now, like I said earlier, Tomino writes characters as they are, not how we want them to be. A distressed teen fumbling when they're trying to storm off in a huff is about as real as it gets. Now, I've also said before that animation is both a deliberate and a visual medium. There's no point in animating something you don't have to, so why include this little detail? I think it tells us a lot about Camille's character, and if you really want to get pedantic, it tells us a lot about Emma, too, being Camille's stumbling block. Now, I'm not saying that Emma tripped him on purpose, but remember how I said that just her very presence in this conversation might have done more harm than good? It's definitely something to ponder, but for now, I'm confident in just saying that this reflects Camille's lack of maturity and the lack of balance in his life. Now, when Rekoa says that it wasn't a good idea to bring up Char Aznable, it's one of the rare occasions that I like the dubbed line, which I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, "It's a bad habit of mine, name-dropping people to make me seem important," more than the subtitled line, which is, "Regular people like me have a bad habit of wanting to tell others of the various people we know." Either way, we're clearly meant to understand that Rekoa knows Quattro's secret identity, but the idea of name-dropping seems to be a cultural idea that is easier to convey in English. So the episode ends with the often memed image of Kamille crying into his sheets, and again, it's one of those two real moments because grief is ugly. People ugly cry. In real life, most teenagers don't stoically salute over a casket and then carry on with their lives. They express their pain in embarrassing ways like this. So that's it for episode 5. It's another heart-wrenching one for Kamille. But what do you guys think? Is Kamille out of line the way that he's grieving his parents? Is Quattro wise for trying to bond with Kamille over the shared trauma that they've experienced? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this content, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. If you want to support the channel, I have links to my Patreon down in the description below. There's some pretty nifty perks that you get each month. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you later.